We are now live on YouTube.
I missed it. Where's my?
We are live on YouTube.
So, Mr. Gibson, do you have everyone you need?
I think so, Mr. Smith. Let me just do one last check. Yeah, I think everyone's here.
Mr. Smith, this is John. We're live on YouTube and ready to go when you are.
Thank you, John. So, guess I'll give it a couple more minutes and we'll start right at 5. I have 3 devices and 3 different times, so. Okay, I'm showing 5 o'clock. So I would like to welcome everybody to our board work session. The board is going to participate in a work session regarding our adjusted budget. The board members are participating via Zoom. I'd like to welcome those who are participating via Zoom and those watching the board meeting via YouTube. The link to the meeting is on the district webpage under Board of Education. If the board is on break, the screen will fade to black and the sound will be muted. In the event there is a disruption in the audio portion, I will pause the meeting until it is reestablished. I have Mr. Stephen Otero participating via Zoom. Can you hear me, Mr. Stephen Otero?
Yes, I can.
I have Mr. Frank Otero. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Mr. David Vickers, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Mr. Eloy Hidon, can you hear me?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson, can you hear me?
Can.
And Ms. Searmans, can you hear me?
Where's
Yes, I
my-
can.
Thank you. So I'd also like to remind everybody, if you're not actively engaged in the conversation, please mute your microphone so we don't get a whole lot of feedback. As I said, this is a work session, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. In this work session, we're going to present to you the amended budget for the upcoming fiscal year for the 21-22 school year. This budget is amended 2021. Sorry, this budget is amended as a result of changes that were made to the equalization guarantee and the special legislative session during the summer. Ms. Searmans and her staff have done a wonderful job in putting this budget together. It has lots of variables in it. They've presented it fully to the leadership team in the district, not just the executive staff, but leaders of other departments. It has also been presented to NEA, and tonight we're presenting it to the board for discussion and review prior to its presentation at the meeting on October 27th, when hopefully it will be adopted. I do want to say from the beginning that this budget, once it's submitted to the state and approved by PPD, will be a budget that will be in place through January of 2021. At that point in time, the legislature reserves the right, of course, to change the equalization formula. So I'm hoping that we don't have to come back again and ask for another change because of a reduction in this budget. But that is altogether possible. So I'm going to turn at this point over to Claire and her staff to present. We will be happy to answer any questions along the way or at the end of the presentation. So Claire, it's all yours.
Thank you.
I just have one quick one because my thing is freezing here. Are you going to share your screen, Claire?
John is going to share the presentation with
Perfect.
us.
Okay. Good enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, John, and put the presentation up, please. So, Mr. President, members of the board, we're going to be talking about the budget this evening. You guys approved the budget last May, and I'm going to take you through the timeline that has transpired since last May. Next slide. Los Lunas Board of Education approved the budget on May 12th. The operational budget that was submitted was $81,345,000. And state equalization guarantee, that's the state funding formula, was $75 million. Shortly after the budget was approved, then we knew that there was going to be a special legislative session that was going to take place in June. The session was June 18th through the 20th. And at that time, we knew that there was going to be cuts to our budget that we had just approved. On July 1st is when the new fiscal year took effect. And on July 30th, we received the adjusted initial program unit value from the Public Education Department. It reduced the unit value from $4,758.10 to $4,531.74. That was a 4.76 reduction in the unit value. And the unit value then gets multiplied by the program units, and that's what generates the state equalization guarantee. Next slide, please. So since July, we were expecting the information to come through showing us what our reduction to the budget was. Given that we knew it was a 4.76%, we were estimating somewhere around $3.8 million. But on September 9th, when we actually received the email from the Public Education Department, our reduction was listed at $7,794,524. So, you know, I literally fell off my chair and and panicked for a minute, but very quickly we established with the Public Education Department that what was reduced from the budget that we weren't expecting is ELT, and ELT is the extended learning time application that had been submitted to the Public Education Department. And as our district went through the process of having our extended learning time approved for the second time, then there were some questions, and in the meantime, it was removed from the budget. So September 11th, then we received an email that our ELT extended learning time application had been approved. So I inquired about receiving the adjusted budget so we could deal with just the difference from what we were expecting and what we know is ELT. And it took them a little while to get back to us with that information. So we immediately started working on the budget, and you know, this is where I'd like to thank Sandy and Carlos. They've worked tirelessly. Elena, you know, she was very much involved with the ELT program department and working to get our application approved. So all these individuals played a very important part in this process at that time. The salary schedules were already adjusted from the beginning of the year, and that's because we knew at the end of June that we were going to have a reduction, and the legislation had changed at that time. So there was already a lot of work that had been put into the budget and making the adjustments prior to us receiving the justification on September 9th with the budget amount. Next slide, please. As we were working through the reductions, there were a couple of items that we discussed as a cabinet and as leadership in the district. Mr. Gibson also had communicated conversations that he had with the board. And our number one goal for the discussions that and the budget reductions that were going to take place was that no one in the district would lose their job. And that was our number one priority, and that's what we used moving forward. Through attrition, and that's as positions became vacant for retirements, resignations, and other various reasons, we would be filling those on an evaluation basis. So based on the funding source, because some of our federal programs pay for salaries, enrollment, and necessity or specialty of positions, and those positions would be evaluated and obviously approved by Mr. Gibson in order to be filled. So at this time, then there are still several positions that are open and other positions that have been filled. And we currently are filling those on an evaluation basis. And then we were going to make sure that we complied with all the statutory requirements from the legislative session and the special session that took place. And then as soon as school started in August, then we realized the loss of enrollment, and we knew we were going to have to prepare for fiscal year 2021-22. So those were all goals, and those were all taken into consideration as we move forward with the reductions. Next slide, please. I'm not going to read through this, and I apologize that it's a little bit of a small print. You guys were already given a chart of accounts when we approved the budget last May, and these definitions for the functions were included in that information. But this is just a reminder of the definitions of the different functions, and this will help us on the next couple of slides because we're going to talk about the budget in terms of function. And the number one function, the 1,000 function, that's direct instruction. That's all of the expenditures, include the activity dealing directly with the interaction between the teachers and the students provided for the students. So that's all of the teachers and aide salaries, athletics, activities, anything related to teaching the student is included in that. And then you can see the other functions, definitions. And if you have any questions, we can revert back to this slide if necessary. Next slide, please. So here is the summary of the reductions by function. So again, if you need to refer back to the previous slide, the definitions are there, but the 1,000 function looks like the largest reduction, and that's the one directly related to the students. But as you can see, $3.7 million of that is directly related to ELT. So we were told we had to submit a reduction for the $7.7 million. And then we're expecting at this time to put the ELT money back in. That's $4,091,000. And then the net effect is $3.7 million. And that's definitely what we were expecting given the legislative session and the reduction in the unit value. A lot of these are going to be related to the difference in the salary adjustments. And then again, you'll have the ELT portion, which the $4 million was reduced, but then we are also going to do a budget adjustment to put the ELT money back in. And the ELT money is related to the extension of the school year for our staff and our students, and also the after-school programs that we participate in. Let's go to the next slide, and I think this will help summarize it in more detail. So here's the summary of the bar changes from the initial budget. And again, we can refer back to the previous slide if necessary. 40% was reduced from the substitute expense. So we had budgeted back in the spring for a year's worth of substitutes, and given the situation that we're in, although we do still have some substitutes that are working, we significantly reduced that budget because we are not having the same amount of substitutes working on a regular basis. 3% reduction in raises. So the legislative session back in January and February approved a 4% raise for all staff. And in the special session in June, the reduction went from 4% down to 1% for all non-administrative staff. And then 4% reduction in raises for all administrators. So all of our non-administrative staff, which includes all of our staff besides administrators, received an average 1% raise, and that was per legislation. The administrators did not receive a raise at all for this fiscal year. The reduction in the medical insurance premium was reduced 2.7%. So right now the increase is sitting right at about 6% over last year, but it was 8.7%. Once we reduce salaries and benefits, then you do have the associated payroll taxes that decrease 23.8%. So those were all taken into consideration as the salaries were paid and encumbered. We reduced all of the supply budgets across the board by 10%. And we reduced all of the professional development that was budgeted and operational by 10%. The next reduction was to the student travel line item, and the majority of the student travel line item is for athletics and other extracurricular activities. And right now, in the situation that we're in, and the fact that sports events have been postponed until the spring, then we worked with Mr. Holland and Brian Baca in the athletic budget and reduced that travel budget by 25%. The reduction to transportation support is the fact that operational supplements the transportation budget on an annual basis. And this was reducing the budget for the transportation support, given the fact that we had CARES money and a couple of other options. We felt that it was necessary to reduce this right now, and in the event that we need to support it to the same extent that we have in years past, we would be able to utilize the CARES funding, and we would possibly have other options moving forward. And then given the situation, then we reduced the utilities budget pretty significantly because we've realized a great deal of savings with our facilities not being used 24/7 like they have been in the past. Is there any questions at this time?
Board members? Is
Okay.
this the last slide, Claire?
No, there's a couple more.
Okay, okay, good. Okay.
Thanks.
I guess we have no.
Next slide, please. So just to give you the timeline of where we are, we already talked about where we've been since last May when you approved the budget. June, there was a special legislative session with the 4.76 reduction. Like Mr. Gibson mentioned a little bit earlier, as we transition into January 2021, the state has the option to set the final unit value, and that's in statute that every year by the end of January, they set the final unit value. There's been lots of at least conversation and discussion that there could be another possible decrease in the unit value at that particular time. That's not something that we know for sure. That's just something that we will prepare for until we get that final number. Also, typically in January, we have our financial statements back from the state auditor's office. And at that time, we do plan to have some additional cash in the operational budget that we will be able to add back in to areas that we feel necessary given the cuts that we're proposing this evening. And then moving forward, we need to absolutely prepare for the future and make sure that the district stays in good financial health. Our initial student counts are down between 400 and 500 students, and that's actually information on the next slide. We'll talk about that. This isn't just the Lasona Schools issue. This is a statewide problem. And as we attend the secretary's calls on a biweekly basis, then that's a common topic amongst the other school districts, as well as everybody has seen a decrease in enrollment. Later on this week, we have our membership projections due to the Public Education Department. And right now, the direction that we've been given is to prepare those with the numbers, the actual numbers that we are seeing. So we plan to do that. Next slide, please. Tomorrow is our actual 40th day count. That's a real important count day for the state. But you can see here we've had 2 warm body count comparisons on our 10-day and 20-day. And the difference between the 10-day and the 20th day is right at about 484 students. So right now we are currently down 484 students from where we were last year on our 10-day and our 20-day. When you translate that into dollars, what that means to the operational budget will likely be about $3.5 million to $4 million. So we would be remiss if we weren't preparing right now for what's to come next year as well. And $3.5 million is a significant amount of money. This year, like I said, we're able to prepare for the cuts and not have to touch any staff members, not anybody have to lose their job, not recommend any reduction in force at this time. Moving forward, that's definitely something that we'll keep open as an option. And as some of these positions are held and not filled, then hopefully we receive savings from those as well. And then as we submit this information to the state, next slide, please, John. Then we're very conscious of where the dollars, where our money is being spent. And with the 1,000 function right at 57%, then the majority of our money is still going directly to the students and benefiting the students of the district. And the breakdown, of course, is attached, but that is, again, a lot of where salaries and benefits are paid out of. 85% of our operational budget is salaries and benefits. And so in order to maintain the money going to the students, then that's where we're making sure that we're keeping the priority on the students. And that, Mr. Smith and Mr. Gibson, is the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Sherman. Board members, I'll turn it over for questions. Comments?
Mr. Smith, let me just explain one more thing, kind of what we can expect here in the next couple of weeks. The notification that we received with the changes to our budget are due at the end of this month. So next Tuesday is our finance meeting, and we will prepare the documents according to the discussion that we're having this evening. The budget adjustments will be on the agenda, and we will have a roughly $8 million reduction to the operational budget. And then we will have another budget adjustment request, adding back in the ELT, which was right at about $4 million, and the difference being the 3.7 that we were asked to reduce from the special session. And after that, then we have until the end of this month to submit this information, our budget adjusted to the state.
Okay. So I will ask again, board members, if you have any questions and/or comments at this time. So I just have a couple of comments. This is very, very unfortunate for us and way beyond any of our control. And I am confident that we're going to work through this, all the while keeping our #1 focus of these children at the forefront. And we're going to work to do whatever it takes to do the best job we can for them. I did have a conversation with Mr. Gibson when we realized that this is probably not going to be a pretty picture when we get to this stage. And we did talk about some of the things that we wanted to do. And first and foremost, we talked about the money for the children and making sure that we did not lose any staff members. And I think that's very, very important to us as a district. I think that we're going to be able to do this. I think we've all at some point in our life had to tighten our belts, and we've gotten through it. And this is one of the times that this district's going to need to stick together. We're going to need to start understanding where everybody's coming from. We're all going to tighten our belts. And as I said last night, this too will pass and we will get through this. And if we work together, I think it'll be much better for all of us. So I appreciate the report. Mr. Gibson, do you have any closing comments?
I guess my only closing comment would be what Claire has already mentioned and what you alluded to. This may get worse before it gets better. Districts across the state have lost students. There's no rhyme nor reason to it. It's not like students have left Los Lunas and gone to Albuquerque or Berlin or any other place for that matter. It appears from the work that we've done that we've lost some students to homeschooling. We've lost some students to online schools. Ironically, the enrollment loss has been at the elementary level, and we've actually gained students at the secondary level. One of the other things that we've seen is that those schools that have higher socioeconomics, that is fewer students in free and reduced lunch, we've lost more students. I would assume that's because those parents have more options and have chosen those options. So we're constantly looking to find where our students have gone. We've used our SROs, we've used our principals, we've used our counselors. We have tried to track every student Some are, in some cases, we found empty homes where people have moved. In other cases, we've been informed that parents have made other choices and other options. We're fairly confident that when all of this pandemic ends, that people will come back to our schools. Hopefully that's before the state makes any kinds of decisions that could be disastrous to us and other districts. But I do want you to know that this is a situation across the entire state, that as I get on meetings with superintendents, and you'll hear this tomorrow night, I'm sure, in our Region 4 meeting, this is an issue that all districts are facing. I think Claire and her staff have done a remarkably good job of putting together a budget. Over time, I told you this when I first came here, Claire and the staff have done a great job of managing our finances. We're in an enviable position, but things could get worse. If they do, I think we've got a little bit of a rainy day fund that may be better than most districts have carried over. So congratulations to Claire and her staff. They've done a wonderful job managing our fiscal resources. So that said, I support this budget as will be presented to finance and then to the board. But I also want you to know that it may very well change in January.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. And yes, let's all wish good thoughts on January, because I would venture to say that the odds are it may not get any better in January 2021. But again, I think we'll get through this, and I think that we'll be fine. So if there's no other comments, I'd like to state that this item was for presentation only. There was no action to be taken. Therefore, we didn't take any action. Before we leave, I would like to do a quick reminder of the upcoming meeting. Tomorrow is the NMSBA Region 4 Fall Meeting from 5 to 7 p.m. It's going to be held via Zoom. We will have a quorum in attendance, so we have to keep that in mind. But it is very, very important that board members attend the Region Fall Meeting. We're required to participate in training every year, and this counts towards those hours for the individual board members and also for the board as a whole, because we were on a roll there, winning the participation trophy for a couple of years in a row there, and we need to get back to where we were over there. Plus, it's some valuable information as far as boardsmanship, and it's a great place to ask some questions and get that stuff done. So please attend the Region 4 meeting tomorrow evening from 5 to 7. Also, I would like to remind you that on October 20th, we have a Finance Committee meeting at 4 p.m. in the conference room. I believe that's at 4, yes. On October 21st, we have an Audit Committee meeting at 9 a.m. invitation only in the conference room. And October 27th, we have a regular board meeting at 6 p.m. in the boardroom. And as we always state, the location is dependent on CDC mandates. If needed, the meetings will be held via Zoom. And that being said, I would like to thank everybody for coming. I want you to all have a good night, and let's work together and get this done. Thank you so much.